It's 2 blue mana only, Enchanted Enchantment. Gain control of Enchanted Enchantment. And this card is amazing. And this entire video could be something of a card review for this thing. It is so fascinating that there are so many cards in this game that I don't even know about. I started to accidentally see this card in some deck lists online, and I realized this is actually great. I guess what happened is that someone accidentally went through all the existing cards and accidentally found this thing, started playing it, and then other people saw this card and started adding it to their list as well. And this card is actually amazing. But why am I so fascinated about it? Let's begin with the Carpet of Flowers. And then we have Smothering Tide, and of course Rhystic Study as well. And let's also throw in a Sylvan Library. Now you could solve all of these problems with a 1 green mana Nature's Claim in instant speed. However, a big problem when you're playing these control cards such as Nature's Claim is that you're going down in hand size yourself. You aren't gaining anything in the process of doing this interaction against your opponents. This is something I've talked about previously in another video called Cantrip Control. Now with the Steel Enchantment, you're breaking this little parity. You are removing the enchantment for your opponent. I have to mention, it's in sorcery speed. So if someone puts Smothering Tide into play and then casts Wheel of Fortune the same turn, you can't actually use this thing. So you kind of need some Nature's Claim anyways. However, with Steel Enchantment, you're removing that annoying Smothering Tide from your opponent and you're gaining it yourself. That is an amazing grind value that's gonna put you ahead compared to your opponents. You're removing things from your opponents and you're gaining something as well in the process. And that is something of the main game plan for control decks. Acquire an advantage the longer the game goes and increase your win percentage the longer the game goes, where you eventually become something of an arch enemy, where you're so powerful in mana and hand size that you're able to put your combo into play and win through all of your opponent's interaction by just having more value and more power yourself. So now maybe I'm inspiring you into building some form of control steel deck, and that is basically what this video is about. Trying to talk about how you would put that deck into function and how you would make it cEDH viable. Here we have two other cards, Legacy Allure and Gilded Drake. You're probably already playing Gilded Drake, it's a staple. You kind of have it almost always in every single deck when you have access to blue. You steal commanders and other creatures you want to have. Legacy Allure, the same thing, a lot weaker, but you don't give away a free flyer. And it actually takes a little bit of time uptick to steal things, but for just one turn cycle, you can steal a Thrasius, and now you don't need to cast your own commander, you've taken away their Thrasius, and now you can sit there and grind some value. You can steal Tune after turn 2 cycle, and it builds upwards. However, when you're going down this pathway, there is a risk of ending up inside a so-called trap. Here we have two cards, Desertion and Pierce Whim, and I would actually like to mention that Desertion is my favorite card inside the entire Magic the Gathering format. When I was a kid, I had a 60 card deck where the only win con was 4 copies of Desertion in that deck. It was pure counterspell, pure removal, and 4 copies of Desertion. And no one wanted to play with me. And then, but as a person who truly loves Desertion, I have to say that it's not cEDH viable in this fast metagame in the format we currently play. It's probably an amazing card in casual, and if you're playing casual, you should play this thing. But the 5 mana basically makes it unplayable in my opinion. However, the value is there. If you for some reason would have a metagame in your local playgroup where a 5 mana cost Desertion isn't that big of a deal, this is probably a thing you could go for if you want to build this form of control deck. You could steal an opponent's commander. I mean, they cast their Kenrith for 5 mana, you spend 5 mana to cast this Desertion, and you take that spell. That is actually pretty decent. It's not amazing, it's decent. And if someone plays their Seedborn Muse, you can steal their Seedborn Muse. So there are some room for it in various strange metagame, but in general, I don't recommend Desertion in cEDH. The same thing can actually be said about Pierce Whim. Now, Pierce Whim isn't a control steal card, it's forcing all of your opponents to sacrifice an artifact or enchantment. That is removing something for all of your opponents, but you you gain a land in the process. Even though you're getting something of a fetch land or a basic land, you're still gaining something. You're building up a better late game potential. And that is what you want to do in control decks. You want to make sure you don't lose the game early and then continue building forward, making the game a little bit longer where you're in a state where you're unbeatable. However, this card is not for fast combo decks, and it's not good versus really fast combo decks either. And the 4 mana makes it a little bit too expensive in my opinion, so I don't recommend that card. It is basically a trap. However, if you're in that very slow and grindy metagame, this is something to consider. It's good versus other control decks, so to say. But there actually is a really expensive steal spell that actually sees a little bit of play in Yuriko Tiger Shadow, Commandeer. And Yuriko kinda likes this for 2 reasons. Yuriko enjoys really big CMC spells such as Commandeer. When you flip into this with Yuriko, that is 7 loss of life to all of your opponents. Also, Yuriko usually builds a really big hand size, and this is something of a force of will. You can remove 2 blue cards from your hand to cast this thing without paying its mana cost. That is amazing. You should always respect cards whenever you don't need to pay mana for them. And when you cast this, gain control of target non-creature spell, you may choose new targets for it. Now, I would actually like to point out that Commandeer isn't a counter spell, so it actually goes through both Veil of Summer and Boseiju Who Shelters All. And I would like to actually read Veil of Summers. Spells you control can't be countered this turn. You can actually target spells on the stack that are Veil of Summer protected with counterspells, but it doesn't do anything. So you can target the spell with Commandeer, and because it's not a counterspell, you actually go through the Veil of Summer. I mean, just imagine this scenario. Someone puts a mana crypt into play turn 1, and for some reason you don't steal it with Commandeer, then follows up with a basic island, and then cast turn 1 Rhystic Study. This actually happens from time to time, and it's really powerful turn 1 play. And you use Commandeer, you exile 2 cards from your hand, you spend Commandeer, you totally lose 3 cards, but since you're gaining a turn 1 Rhystic Study before you actually have your turn, you're going to refill the cards that you lose from it. But you actually don't need much of these steal cards. You don't need to go steal tribal. That is probably really bad. You might end up with a really high CMC, and you don't need to take everything your opponents got. You need a few key cards that are affecting the game flow in your particular favor. So basically you need to steal that Seedborn Muse, that Notion Thief, that even Mind Sensor, or that Commander some of your opponents are playing to basically just take over the game from that point. For example, the game is getting a little bit longer because of various stacks, effects and control cards, making sure no one is winning the game with their combo, and everyone is playing Thrasius or Thrasius similar commanders such as Kenrith, etc, etc. But one player got a Linvala, Keeper of Silence in play, making sure none of the other opponents of his are able to activate their commander and gain value. So that player is basically trying to run ahead. Then suddenly someone uses their Gilded Drake to steal that Linvala from them, gaining the Linvala themselves, so now they can activate, and the person who originally owned Linvala are now shut down. And this is where the stealing only needs to affect a key component in the game to basically take over the game in your favor. So you don't need to steal everything, you just need to steal that specific thing. And this is basically where your skill in threat assessment and game analysis has to be put into great use, figuring out what is the best decision in this specific match. So if you want to put this sort of stealing control deck together, I highly recommend having a few of these steal cards that are low CMC and really functional in the current metagame, but you still have those really important interactions such as Nature's Claim and Abrupt Decay, really low CMC spells in instant speed to disrupt your opponents when they are trying to do something really scary. But there are a few ways you could make this game style explode out of proportions with some synergy only using individually good cards on their own. So let's say that you're playing Kenrith the Returned King, and you want to win the game with some infinite mana using Dockside Extortionist loops, and you want to include Lurrus inside that deck because you want to make Lurrus an individually good card, and actually Lurrus is a pretty amazing card. For example, you can recast the Dockside Extortionist from your graveyard, and that is really amazing and good. That Cat Nightmare is... But with the Cat Nightmare, you can recast Legacy Allure from your graveyard. So you cast Legacy Allure, you pass turn, it gets a treasure counter on it, you sacrifice it, and you steal a power 1 creature such as a Mana Dork, Thrasius, Bloom Tender, Priest of Titania, something of that sort. And then you immediately on the same turn recast it for only 2 blue mana, and then you pass turn, and you basically steal a power 1 creature each turn. And if you want to make Lurrus a little bit stronger inside that deck with a little bit more consistency, you could include the bubbles such as Urza's Bubble, which is basically 0 mana to look at some random card and then draw a card next upkeep. But there are a lot of different ways you could basically build this kind of strategy, and depending on your metagame, maybe you could include the Desertion and even Pierce Whim, depending on your metagame, of course. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like what I do and you wanna support me, feel free to share my videos or even checking out my Patreon page. Also, purchasing cards from the TCG Players website using the affiliate link in the description below of the video will also help the channel grow. So a big thank you to all of you.